Hello, my name is Fisher, and I welcome you all to the first episode of the Kansas City Conspiracies podcast, with hopefully more to come, in which we will be discussing the possibility of conspiracies and urban legends about the greater Kansas City metro. While we aren't the largest city on the map, this city has a deep history that has inevitably led to numerous conspiracies and theories about our ever-growing city. Growing up in the city, I've developed a deep love for the area, which makes me all the more interested in the theories we'll be discussing. Today, I will be focusing on one of the largest urban legends of the city, involving the political mob boss, Thomas James Pendergast. This conspiracy involves him burying bodies of his political rivals in the cement of Brush Creek. This is one of the urban legends I've heard my entire life, starting from my father, who heard it from his great-grandfather, alongside the endless stories throughout the mobster area of Kansas City. This story was not only just told to me by my father, but I'd always hear it from friends, family, and I'm pretty sure almost every time I drove past Brush Creek, I'd think of the Prohibition-era bodies that were rumored to be buried deep below the water. Additionally, looking out of many of my high school's windows, I had a view of Brush Creek running through the heart of the Country Club Plaza region in Kansas City. Spending many class periods staring at the rumored burial grounds led me to developing a deep curiosity of the story of Boss Tom and his supposed body burial. When we take a look at the significance Thomas Pendergast had in the city, it becomes much more understandable why this rumor has such a deep history. Before we get into examining the validity of this conspiracy itself, let's take a little bit of time to look at the background of this theory. So who was T.J. Pendergast, Boss Tom, the Pendergast machine? It all originally came to fame with the death of his brother, who was a successful politician and representative of the poor and underprivileged immigrant populations in Kansas City. After James Pendergast's death, his brother Tom took over with a more cynical outlook for the political future of their hometown. Starting as a ward boss and alderman, over the course of his political career, Tom shifted from a familial background of helping the impoverished to a path of creating a lawless city of vices. While not maintaining any long-lasting political positions, Pendergast became heavily involved in local politics. In the late 1910s, his work with the Jackson County Democratic Party gained him economic and political power in the city. Pendergast was effectively able to control the majority of elections and elected positions in the greater Kansas City area, which led to it being referred to as Tomstown. This enormous power later contributed heavily to the election of President Truman. During his reign, Kansas City prospered enormously. This boom only continued throughout the Prohibition's era, where Casey's pipes never ran dry. While still enforcing taxation, Pendergast's control over the police department allowed alcohol to be almost as readily available as water. With this unusual political situation, there are obviously those who opposed Pendergast and his criminal ties. There are countless murders that have been found to be connected to him and his machine. This problem avoided dispose of the many bodies, alongside the mysterious construction involving the paving of Brush Creek, contributes to why many Kansas Cityans still today believe Pendergast paved the creek to dispose of the bodies acquired through his mass murdering, burying them in the cement and letting the water run back over. With his power in the city, Pendergast's business ventures were overwhelmingly successful. With controlling governing politics, Pendergast was able to bribe Kansas City politicians in order to vote for him, win him votes, win him construction contracts, and get his concrete company to pave miles of concrete throughout the city. This effectively led him to holding a monopoly on liquor sales and concrete. This playing of both sides ultimately led to his company, Ready Mixed Concrete, receiving the contract for the paving of the local Brush Creek. Due to past floods that were affecting the businesses on the nearby Country Club Plaza, the decision came to pave sections of Brush Creek with the hopes of preventing future flooding. And, to no one's surprise, Ready Mixed Concrete was the group chosen to complete the project. Now that we have a little bit of the background established, let's jump more into the specifics of this situation and the claim that we're going to be looking at today, which is the belief that Pendergast and his associates used this paving as a way to dispose of the bodies they acquired through their mob rule by hiding them in the cement as it was poured. Just for a little bit of clarification, the fact that Pendergast's concrete company, Ready Mixed Concrete, was chosen to complete the contract, and that his machine frequently had the need to dispose of bodies are both undisputed claims and not what we're going to be examining today. We're solely going to be looking at the fact that there may or may not be bodies buried under the cement. Now, Pendergast bribing to win contracts was not an uncommon thing. Even once when asked if he was using his connections and bribery to win cement contracts, Pendergast himself was quoted as saying, "Yes, why not? Aren't my products as good as any?" End quote. To begin with, Kansas City's public library has records showing the original plan for the paving as part of a 10-man improvement plan for Kansas City. The goal was to have the concrete be only 8 to 10 inches thick and 70 feet wide, running the length of the creek as it bordered the Country Club Plaza. City officials at the time explained that paving the bed would prevent the accumulation of stagnant pools, which had created the nuisance and also permitted the channel to empty floodwaters into the Blue River, the river that it flows into, an hour or so sooner, preventing backup. Serious flooding occurred in the creek in 1934 and 1935, which is the main reason that this contract got approved. It is expected to cost just under $1.4 million, which equates to around $33 million now. The project also employed over 1,600 workers who were part of the Work Project Administration, or WPA, of which Pendergast handpicked local WPA project manager Matthew Murray, which led to Pendergast being able to select every single worker who would be present on the job site of the project. Now, while these numbers might not seem too meaningful if you're unfamiliar with the area, and the limited pictures from this time don't do a fantastic job at displaying the sections of Brush Creek, anyone who's lived in the city or been around the area knows that these numbers seem absurd. The cost and the number of workers are drastically overkill. The section that is paved was only about a mile long, and I'm far from any construction expert, but it seems extreme. Yeah, that's just my opinion, but that's a lot of money for very little amount spent. Another piece that has led people believing the possibility of an alternative motive for the paving is the limited information pertaining to the construction. With the money and construction for the project coming from the Works Project Administration as part of the New Deal, it's logical to assume that the government would require extensive documentation on the project and where the funding would be going, which is true for most other cases. But as in the case of the ready-mixed concrete and other projects Pendergast administered, there is very little evidence pertaining to them. The Kansas City Hall and Municipal Auditorium are examples of these. Little information about the construction of all three is present, and all three were projects granted to ready-mixed concrete. For Brush Creek, its budget was even larger. It required additional funding, with the sole reason being provided of needing more concrete. However, no price was finalized or ever disclosed and published. One instance in which the absurd amount of concrete that was fully seen is with the municipal airport. Larson and Holston briefly examined this in their book about Pendergast, in which they found that enough ready-mixed concrete went into laying the runway at the municipal airport to pave 24 miles of standard highway. Cross points at the airport were reportedly as thick as 36 feet. To put this in a little bit of perspective, Mercurial's aviation services stay at the very high end for the toughest runways. Only about 16 to 18 inches thick are needed, which is less than 2 feet, versus the 36 feet at the Kansas City Municipal Airport, which is insane to think about. Now, while this doesn't provide any proof for the reasoning in the Brush Creek rumor, the irregularities don't end there. There are news stories of the creek's paving occurring at night, which is said to minimize disturbance to the adjacent Country Club Plaza businesses and shops. However, during the time of the paving, all the local businesses were still closed following the recent flooding. Additionally, many prominent people in the city opposed the paving of the creek on the grounds that it destroyed the natural beauty and would be ineffective at solving the flooding. One of the major opposers was Jesse Nichols, who developed the greater Kansas City Country Club Plaza region and many of the surrounding neighborhoods. Nichols is credited as saying, "The paving ruined the natural beauty of the stream," end quote. This led to Nichols not using ready-mixed concrete for any of his future building projects, which subsequently led to Pendergast missing out on massive building contracts over the following decades throughout the city's expansion. Additionally, this had little effect in stopping the flooding of the creek, which was only made worse by the quicker flowing water and lack of vegetation to absorb any water. While Pendergast had a large amount of power in Kansas City, he still sought to keep a good public opinion of himself in order to maintain his power. This makes the controversial paving of the creek an unlikely move for him. Contributing to this was the lack of future improvements made to the creek. It wasn't until a severe flood in 1977 hit, killing 25 people, that any future improvements were made to the creek, despite its regular flooding. Had Pendergast sought to right his wrong in the paving of Brush Creek, he could have petitioned to make an additional improvement at the creek, which would have both netted him more money and fixed the negative press surrounding the construction, but no efforts were made in this direction. Now that we have looked into some of the evidence for this claim, let's examine some of the alternative reasons for the creek's paving. To start with, Pendergast loved concrete, but what he loved more is the money it put in his pockets. Speaking strictly economically, Pendergast literally profited from every ounce of concrete poured. There was an enormous incentive to maximize the profits, as he did in other locations such as the airport that we already mentioned. One location that has not been truly examined, but has been referred to often, is Pendergast's home. A Redditor who claims to have worked in the home Pendergast built says that, and I quote, "The walls, floor, and basically anything that could be concrete was poured concrete. We couldn't dig anywhere near the house to do any additional landscaping, as there was a 5-foot concrete outline surrounding the entire foundation. Crazy stuff," end quote. And yes, if all that is true, I would agree, that is some crazy stuff. Also, during the time of the creek's paving, Pendergast was deep in financial troubles due to his addiction on gambling on horse races. Pendergast was estimated to have lost $2 million in 1935 alone. With this being the same year of the paving, it's quite possible the project was a last-ditch effort to pay off many of his accumulated debts. And the public opinion of the project was not taken into his full consideration due to the other circumstances. However, this does bring the question of why would you actually need to pour the concrete? With Pendergast's control over the city politics, he could have just paid a few bribes and claimed to have poured more concrete than it was actually used, which would have had generated him even more money. When it comes to the lack of records surrounding the paving, this can be explained by the situation in which the construction was approved. For those involved, it seems logical to minimize records and documents that could easily tie them to the Pendergast machine of organized crime, which could jeopardize any of their future political careers. Another reason for the lack of future improvements is the decline in Pendergast's machine after the paving. Not even a full year after the creek's completion, Pendergast was arrested on charges of tax evasion and sentenced to prison. After his release, he lived a very reclusive life and died only a few years later. During this time, Kansas City was undergoing a massive political shift that left little time for non-critical work projects, and explained why it took decades for Brush Creek to be improved. Now, one of the biggest reasons people cite in denying this claim is that following the floods of 1997, the new era of construction began that dug up much of the original concrete and sought to actually fix the problem. During this time, 0 bodies were found in the original ready-mixed concrete. For most, this put an end to the over 4 decades of rumors surrounding Pendergast. Every source I found regarding Pendergast and the paving of Brush Creek mentions this construction and the lack of bodies they found as being the final nail in the coffin. But that is not necessarily the case. When looking deeper into this conspiracy, I found the records of the 1970s construction and the areas of original concrete that were exhumed. If we take a look at this image here, we can see the layover of the new construction outlined. These sections shown on Google Earth were not replaced, and therefore still have the remnants of the 1935 concrete, which leaves the possibility for some Prohibition-era murders to still be hiding under the murky water. For now, there is no way to know for sure if these sections have any deeper secrets. However, this may come to light soon. Starting this year, there is additional construction being done to once again improve and revamp parts of the creek. So maybe someday we'll finally know. When I first chose to take a deeper look into this Pendergast rumor, I fully believed it. Now, after this information, I'm a little more hesitant about it. While there are many oddities surrounding the paving of Brush Creek, there is no concrete, pun intended, evidence proving this claim. While there is still the possibility for some bodies remaining in the unexamined sections of the creek, for the parts that were examined, they were found to be of no unusual thickness. With this information, I personally believe that the construction simply generated the urban legend which spread like wildfire through the city. For me, the financial troubles Pendergast was experiencing and the profit he generated from the paving serve as the best evidence in providing a reasoning for the paving, and it being strictly a purely economic venture for Pendergast. What do you think? Feel free to leave me your own opinions in the comments down below, and also recommendations for my next podcast episode. Once again, this was the Kansas City Conspiracies Podcast. I'm Fisher Reitz, and thank you for listening.